The Akatsuki. Who amongst them is the strongest? Is it Obito? Is it Nagato? Or is it Itachi? Who holds on to the most raw power? Who has the biggest chakra pool? Who's the best at reconnaissance? Who has the strongest dojutsu? Who's the greatest genjutsu user? And so many other questions that all need to be taken into consideration when trying to figure out a power scaling of sorts that places all of the members of the Akatsuki into a perfect 1 through 11 ranking. Because of the 11 important Akatsuki members, each and every single one of them seems to be great at something that another one of the members of the Akatsuki isn't. They are a massively diversified cast and crew of villains who all go about battle in massively different ways. But still, even with all of this to consider, the internet seems to have pretty universally agreed upon a power ranking of sorts for the Akatsuki, or at least for the top 4. Well, at least I thought the internet had agreed on what the Akatsuki's power rankings looked like. That was until recently I was sent an article from a website that's been getting on my nerves a lot recently, comicbook.com. Because while one would assume a website called comicbook.com would know what they were talking about when it came to well, at least comic book adjacent things, every single list I get from this website literally makes my blood boil. And today is no exception to that rule. See, because on July 3rd, 2025, yes, just a couple of days ago, Comic Book decided to post an article named All Akatsuki Members in Naruto from Weakest to Strongest. A layup of an article if you ask me, even if you haven't read or seen Naruto. Just look up what other people say about the power rankings of the Akatsuki, swap maybe entry 5 and 6 and call it a day. But nope. That's not what comicbook.com did. Went balls to the wall and made their own list, and you can tell because it's nonsensical. And thus today I want to go through this list that comicbook.com has made and give you my ranking of the Akatsuki alongside their list, so you can understand well and truly how absolutely insane this collection of words that comicbook.com posted on July 3rd is. So with no further ado, I give to you the worst Akatsuki ranking I've ever seen debunked. But before we get to debunking anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you guys are looking for one additional NC Hammer 23 video, we can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction channel using the 4th wall link in my description below. We are on to the Chunin exams forced of death. So before we hop into this terrible list, comicbook.com has actually laid down a couple of ground rules that they used to set this list up in the first place. Those 3 rules being, and I quote, "We're only talking about the period of the Akatsuki proper. In other words, prior to the events of the 4th Great Ninja War. If we count the events of the 4th Great Ninja War, then Ten Tails Obito clears, and that's not exactly fun or fair." And that right there probably should have been my first red flag, because while I have no issue with only considering the Akatsuki while all of them were alive, the fact that for some reason they believe that this rule of not including the 4th Great Shinobi World War doesn't mean that Obito clears the rest of the Akatsuki, well, is alarming to say the least. Like, well, yes, obviously, Obito clears every single member of the Akatsuki by leaps and bounds. Obito was always the strongest member of the Akatsuki. Whether that was during the proper era of the Akatsuki, the lead up to the 4th Great Shinobi World War with his 6 paths of pain, or Obito, every single one of these iterations of Obito is the strongest member of the Akatsuki. But that's fine. Moving forward, their second rule is we're only including canon members. Filler members or members unelaborated in the manga are excluded. Most are pretty disappointing power-wise, and it would basically just waste your time. Anyways, let's be honest, nobody thinks of Kyusuke when they think of the Akatsuki. I mean, yeah, that's fair. I don't really need you to tell me how strong you think Juzo Biwa is. I mean, dude got killed by his own sword. He's really not all that impressive. And the third and final rule is we're only talking about stripe-wearing members of the Akatsuki. Sasuke, and by extension Taka, might have had an alliance with the Akatsuki, but they weren't Akatsuki members properly speaking, which once again is fine. If you don't consider Jugo and Karin and Suigetsu and Sasuke as members of the Akatsuki, whatever, be my guest. But with those rules now considered, let's hop into this list. With our first entry, aka our last placed entry, which is objectively fine, being Zetsu at number 11. Now, usually when people talk about the weakest member of the Akatsuki, it's a toss-up between 2 names, and those 2 names are Zetsu and Hidan. Now, by virtue of the fact that Black Zetsu was able to kill a 3 Rinnegan Madara, regardless of it being a surprise feat or not, I actually usually tend to put Zetsu above Hidan, because say what you will about it being a surprise feat, the fact that Black Zetsu had the AP to be able to punch through a 3 Rinnegan Deidara implies that his AP is still relatively high. If you put Hidan in the exact same situation and told him to punch through Madara, I don't think he could do it. Now, obviously, there's some implications here about Zetsu being tied to Kaguya, who Madara was intrinsically tied to by being a 10-tailed Shinchuriki, and therefore maybe Black Zetsu had access to a weakness genius of Madara's that nobody else would have had access to. But even if you don't want to consider this moment as a possible buff to Zetsu's potentially massive AP, his intelligence does put him far beyond the power of Hidan. I mean, Black Zetsu was the spoon that stirred the drink of Naruto. Whether it was getting Madara to abandon Konoha, combined his cells with Hashirama's to awake the Rinnegan, alter the stone tablet to make Madara believe that the only way to save the world was through the Eye of the Moon plan, and therefore technically be the actual original founder of the Akatsuki, Black Zetsu's intellect, if it's not number 1 in the universe, it's top 3. And therefore, while a lot of people want to say that Black Zetsu is simply a reconnaissance gatherer, and that really his only attack power comes from when he's fused with White Zetsu and the wood release he gets from that, and as White Zetsu are actively compared to your standard Jonin in terms of fighting potential during the 4th Great Shinobi World War, that would imply that Black Zetsu, when combined with White Zetsu, has the fighting potential of a standard Jonin, and therefore he's definitely the weakest member of the Akatsuki. I think simply based off everything that he was able to accomplish, he should be considered higher than last place. But with this list, I guess hypothetically, we're not considering things that happened during the 4th Great Shinobi World War, but it's not like Black Zetsu gets some kind of power up during the 4th Great Shinobi World War. He's not made mythically stronger during the events of the war, and therefore anything that he did accomplish during the war, he could have accomplished prior. And this article does make a pretty good point of the fact that White Zetsu has access to every single chakra release, including wood release. And his spore technique is not only able to slow enemy movement, but also drain their chakra to an almost deadly effect if you're caught in it for too long. So do I believe that Zetsu is one of the most crazily powerful members of the Akatsuki? No, but I do believe he's stronger than Hidan, who this article has above him at the number 10 entry, which once again, not a terrible entry here. It is pretty universally agreed upon that the 2 weakest members of the Akatsuki are Zetsu and Hidan. And well, yeah, Hidan had a lot of promise to be an insanely powerful ninja on account of the fact that he seems to be the truly only immortal being in the entirety of the Naruto universe. He's really dumb, and he's also a one-trick pony. See, while Hidan is an incredibly competent Kenjutsu and Taijutsu user with his hands, his feet, and his scythe, outside of his Tai and Kenjutsu, the only trick that Hidan has is consuming the blood of his opponent and then stabbing himself in the heart. He doesn't really use any kind of elemental ninjutsu release or genjutsu to try and bolster his ability in combat, which is kind of crazy when you consider the fact that in order to activate his only strong move, his ability to turn himself into a human voodoo doll, he needs to get so up close and personal with somebody that he has to lick the blood off his scythe. And this is a problem that could be 100% eliminated if Hidan used any kind of additional jutsu. See, if Hidan used something like water bullets or wind scythe, he would be able to cut his opponent from a distance. Hell, if Hidan even used throwable weapons, he would be able to cut his opponent from a distance. However, his complete and utter reliance on his pointy stick and his scythe means that any and all blood that Hidan is going to draw from somebody, he has to be within like 3 feet of them to do. Something that probably wouldn't be a problem if Hidan had any and all practice in genjutsu, as Hidan could simply just place somebody in a genjutsu that would lock them up for a couple of seconds, slice their cheek, get their blood, lick the blood, and then stab himself in the heart. But Hidan doesn't do any of this, and therefore anybody with any mid to long range jutsu or genjutsu ability has the ability to usurp his one trick with ease. This is why Shikamaru was able to fairly easily defeat him the second time he fought him, because once you understand that Hidan has the ability to turn himself into a voodoo doll because he's immortal by tasting your blood, you know, okay, I'll stay away from him. And then you do that, and then he dies. So yeah, is being immortal a hell of a one trick to have? 100%. But he probably couldn't beat Tamari in a fight. He couldn't beat anybody who can fly in a fight, like Sai or Inoki or Mu. And anybody even remotely practicing genjutsu like Kurenai could defeat him with relative ease. The only reason that Hidan was able to kill Asuma is because Asuma, like Hidan, was a Kenjutsu and Taijutsu specialist. And while Asuma had access to fire release, that's ironically kind of the worst release you could use against an immortal, because they can just recover from whatever burns you hit them with. However, it's after Hidan that this list starts to go a bit sideways, because coming up at number 9, for some reason, we have Kakuzu. Now, this article goes on to say about Kakuzu is that in Kakuzu's case, the big thing is that he technically has to be killed 5 times before he's defeated. Technically immortal because of his ability to extend his life by extracting organs out of others' bodies, he has 4 accessory hearts that give him access to a full array of elemental affinities. Earth Release Earth Spear makes him incredibly durable and ups the damage of his offensive attacks, adding insult to injury for his already unusually wide arsenal of possibilities. Adding into this his strategic prowess and his extreme speed, and he's a terrifying opponent to face up against. Here's the thing, does Kakuzu die against the most impressive arsenal of ninjas ever put together? No, not necessarily. Kakuzu has to fight against Kakashi, Ino, Choji, and Naruto. But also, Kakuzu is literally about to kill Kakashi when Hidan stabs himself through the heart, believing that the blood he consumed was Shikamaru's, but in actuality, it was Kakuzu's. So Kakuzu actually lost to the combined forces of Naruto, Kakashi, and all of Team 10, who, mind you, understood exactly how his technique worked prior to going into battle against him a second time. But in terms of diversity of abilities, Kakuzu Kakuzu has almost the deepest bag in the entirety of the Akatsuki. He's lived for 100+ years, and he has the ability to steal the abilities of those he kills by using their hearts and placing them into his body. Hearts he can separate from his body to act as golems that fire off elemental release to protect him at any given point. And while these golems can be destroyed if their masks are destroyed, that brings us back to the point that this article highlighted, which is that Kakuzu needs to be killed 5 separate times before he actually dies. Tie that into the fact that he has Earth Grudge Fear, which allows for him to extend his limbs, sew on decapitated heads, and crawl his fists underground for flying uppercuts. And it makes sense that even though Kakuzu lost in his fight against Hashirama, he was able to survive it. And now I know what some of you are going to say, oh, but Tenten killed him in the 4th Great Shinobi World War. No, she didn't. 1, Tenten had the Basho Sen, which is a treasure tool of the Sage of Six Paths that she was only able to swing twice. And 2, she only destroyed his lightning mask. Not even one of his combined masks. Yeah, because remember, he's able to combine his mask golem so that there's 2 or 3 masks in one body so they can combine their elemental releases to give them greater diversity in their attacks. It takes Darui, a future Raikage, Tenten, and Inashika Cho to take down Kakuzu in the 4th Great Shinobi World War. I don't care necessarily exactly where you place Kakuzu, but he should be somewhere between 5 and 7 on your list. 9 is way too low, especially on account of the fact that he is almost definitely stronger than this list's number 8 entry, Konan. Now listen, I am Konan's biggest defender. I don't think she gets nearly as much love as she deserves. She was the person actually running the Hidden Reign for the entirety of the Akatsuki's run of power, kept Nagato alive and supported him as his right-hand woman for the entirety of his rise to the top of the evil version of the Akatsuki, and when it came down to it, she formulated almost a perfect plan for killing the strongest member of the Akatsuki, Obito, when she wanted to defend Nagato's Rinnegan. And while forcing Obito to use Izanagi is probably something that no other member of the Akatsuki probably could have pulled off with the possible exception of Nagato, unfortunately, we really can't give Konan all that much credit for this impressive battle against Obito. 1, because she loses, and 2, because she was able to make this battle plan because she had existed alongside Obito for years and knew exactly how his techniques worked. And while yes, being able to deduce how Obito's techniques works required a certain amount of information to be gathered and therefore a certain amount of intellect, and I have not a singular ounce of doubt in my mind that Konan was top 3 in the Akatsuki when it came to intellect. In the one other important battle that we ever see from Konan, her and Nagato versus Jiraiya treats her as a basically non-factor. See, while yes, she's able to outpace his flame release by firing a flurry of paper shards at him, which is kind of impressive when you consider the fact that her paper-based attacks and her paper body should be weak to flame release. Jiraiya is able to immediately roll out of the attack, cover her in toad oil, and grab her with his hair. A sticky situation that she was only able to get out of on account of the fact that the animal path summoned a crab that was able to blast off all the oil from her, and then immediately told Konan to retreat. All this is to say that Jiraiya, not in his Sage mode, would have been able to dispatch of Konan rather easily. And while I've not a singular doubt in my mind that Jiraiya could also defeat Kakuzu in a fight, I think that fight would be more difficult for Jiraiya than the fight against Konan. So while yes, her intellect and her ability to make plans is to be respected, we can't give her that much props on account of the fact that she knew exactly what to make to kill Obito. It's the same reason we're not using Zetsu's ability to punch through the back of Madara to put him at the top of this list. Now after Konan, at the number 7 entry is another pretty confusing entry, because at number 7, for some reason, we have Orochimaru. Now listen, technically we're not considering the events of the 4th Great Shinobi World War in this list. And therefore, technically, we probably shouldn't consider White Zetsu body Orochimaru. So technically, the iteration of Orochimaru we should be considering is either the Orochimaru right before they swapped into a White Zetsu body, or Orochimaru before they lost access to their arms. See, there's pros and cons to both considerations. Well, the Orochimaru who was able to bring back the 4 Hokage in the lead up to the climax of the 4th Great Shinobi World War was definitely physically weaker than the version of Orochimaru who had access to their arms. Orochimaru gains so much knowledge in the field of Edo Tensei over the course of those couple of years that it may actually make up for the weakness of Orochimaru's inability to access their arms. And the reason I put inability to access their arms in quotation marks here is because if there's one thing that Kishimoto forgot, it's the fact that Orochimaru didn't have access to their arms. And because Orochimaru didn't have access to their arms, hypothetically, Orochimaru didn't have access to any of their jutsu. At least that's what Hiruzen thought he was doing. And while initially that might have been true, with time we came to realize that it really wasn't. As Orochimaru, even without arms, was able to battle against not only a 4-tailed version of Naruto, doing things like summoning a triple Rashomon gate that stopped a literal tailed beast ball, but also put up a pretty good fight against Sasuke while on their literal deathbed after being surprise attacked by Sasuke. Tie that into the fact that there is literally no reason for us to believe that Orochimaru prior to their battle against Hiruzen was any weaker than Jiraiya, as they were all considered members of the legendary Sannin and 3 parts of the 3-way deadlock, who all managed to fight against Hanzo the Salamander and survive. And even if we are considering the Orochimaru who battled against Hiruzen and not White Zetsu Orochimaru that would still make Orochimaru stronger than a lot of members of the Akatsuki, like Deidara, Sasori, and maybe even Kakuzu. All people who probably couldn't have defeated an almost 70-year-old Hiruzen in combat. But since we're talking about getting beaten up by old people, the next entry on this list at a bafflingly high number 6 spot is Sasori. And listen, if I'm not gonna do one thing, it's disrespecting Granny Chiyo and Sakura. The combined forces of Granny Chiyo and Sakura were to legitimately be reckoned with. Not only had Granny Chiyo fought against Sakamo Hatsuki, but also Hanzo the Salamander in her day. If she wasn't the greatest puppet master of all time, she was second. And unfortunately, the argument of, oh, she was in her 80s in this battle against Sasori and therefore incredibly weak, doesn't really work all that well when you consider the fact that she is a puppet user. Well, puppet mastery does absolutely require an active input of chakra, as not only are you controlling the puppets via puppet strings, but also any and all chakra-based attacks being fired out of these puppets comes from the very own user's chakra. If there's one kind of ninja who's able to hold on to their strength into their elderly ages, it would be puppet masters. They just stand there and coordinate attacks with their fingers. Not to mention the fact that Granny Chiyo was the reason that every single one of Sasori's weapons had poison on them. And therefore, in this deadly exchange of puppets between Granny Chiyo and Sasori, if anybody was even scratched by the weapon of a puppet, they would be paralyzed and then killed. And Sasori was a ridiculously impressive ninja, literally earning the title Sasori of the Red Sand during the Third Great Shinobi World War for his ability to repel attackers from the hidden sand. Not to mention the fact that he also killed the third Kazekage, who was talked about as the strongest Kazekage in history, and turned him into a puppet. A puppet so strong that he beat the reincarnated Edo Tensei version of the third Kazekage in a fight. Though that's filler and also was mostly contingent on the fact that the third Kazekage was like, oh my god, I've been brought back to life, what am I doing here? But anyways, when it comes down to it, even though Sasori is responsible for his own death, a pre-Byakuya Seal Sakura and an aging puppet master are able to defeat Sasori in the thing that he's supposedly the best at, which is a battle of puppetry. And while Granny Chiyo and Sakura put down a impressive fight, I don't think it's a fight so impressive that Orochimaru wouldn't have been able to finish it themselves. And therefore, the idea of putting Sasori over Orochimaru does not sit well with me. What also doesn't sit well with me is Deidara at 5. Speaking of people who lost the members of Team 7 before they got any of their final upgrades, Deidara coming in at number 5 above people like Orochimaru and Kakuzu is absolutely bonkers to me. Listen, Deidara does have an impressively deep bag. He has some of the highest mobility out of any member on the Akatsuki, and when it comes to pure destructive power, pretty much only Nagato has him beat. And his C4 ability that allows for him to blow up a clone of himself like a balloon and pop microscopic bombs all throughout the air to be inhaled and then blow away anybody who inhales them is one of the best jutsus in the entirety of the Naruto universe. I mean, literally the only way to counter his C4 is either to electrocute yourself or understand exactly what's going on with the jutsu and not breathe. Don't do either of those things and, well, have fun turning into ash. And that's the thing. Without some kind of dojutsu that allows for you to see these microscopic bombs, you have no idea what's going on when he uses his C4 technique. Tie that into the fact that his C2 bomb was implied to be strong enough to wipe out the entirety of the Hidden Sand Village, which is why Gaara had to cover the Hidden Sand Village with sand, exposing himself to attack, and therefore being defeated by Deidara was the only option afforded to Gaara when Deidara threatened to drop this bomb on the Hidden Sand. And should Deidara ever decide that it's time to show off his final piece of artwork, his C0, by feeding clay to his mouth heart thing, he's able to turn his actual body into an explosion much bigger than that generated by his C2 that destroys everything within a several kilometer radius on a microscopic level. So yeah, as Deidara is pretty much the only other member of the Akatsuki who's said to have abilities that can wipe out the entirety of a shinobi village in one attack, it seems like a fairly good idea to have him pretty high on this list. Right? Well, yes and no. See, like we touched on earlier, literally any and all of Deidara's attacks can be nullified using Lightning Release, with the possible exception of C0. And while Lightning Release is certainly less pervasive in some places than it is in others, as very few people seem to use Lightning Release in places like the Hidden Sand, it's not like Explosion Release is a Kekkei Genkai that the world doesn't understand. A combination of Earth and Lightning Release, it is something that's used fairly commonly in the village hidden in the stone. I mean, there's an entire explosion core. And therefore, while people like Gaara may be at a somewhat strict disadvantage in battle against Deidara because of their inability to use Lightning Release, Gaara would have defeated Deidara rather easily if Deidara hadn't been fighting Gaara over Gaara's village. And Deidara not only lost in combat one-on-one against Itachi, so badly mind you that he trained one of his eyes supposedly so hard that it would be impervious to ocular base genjutsu, but also lost to a pre-MS Sasuke, who would have been able to counter basically any and all of Deidara's attacks, be they C0 or C4 using his Susanoo. So do I think that Deidara deserves the number 5 spot on this list? No. Not at all. Deidara is stronger than Sasori, Hidan, and Konan, and that's That's it. But Deidara being placed at number 5 on this list is all the more confusing when you consider the fact of who's at number 4, which is Obito. Yeah, you heard me. Obito. Let that sink into your skin. The supposedly 4th strongest member of the Akatsuki, Obito Uchiha. Now I know what some of you are thinking, but Nick, remember, we're not considering the 4th Great Shinobi World War. So we're not talking White Mask Obito, we're not even talking Jubito, we're talking standard Toby / Obito. He could be pretty low on the list, right? No, one Mangekyo Sharingan Obito, one Kamui Obito was stronger than Nagato. Would it be a close fight? Maybe? Like, yes, there is absolutely win states for Nagato in a battle against Orange Mask Obito. But ironically, pretty much any and all of those win states require Nagato getting his physical hands on Obito. As standard ways that Nagato would probably win in combat against somebody, like Chibaku Tensai or Almighty Push, just wouldn't work against Obito. Obito could phase into his Kamui dimension when Nagato went to Almighty Push him, and could make his body incorporeal when Nagato tried to use Chibaku Tensai and pull him into a gravity well. Kamui is the most broken Sharingan ability in all of Naruto, and it's not necessarily close, especially the version that Obito has. Obito was a teenager as Yellow Mask Obito, a teenager who released and then controlled Kurama to rampage in the center of Konoha, and then battled on relatively even ground against one of the strongest Hokage of all time in Prime Minato. And while yes, Obito lost, over the course of that battle, he does A, press Minato, and B, control Kurama with Genjutsu. And if controlling the entirety of the strongest tailed beast in existence with Genjutsu wasn't impressive enough, Toby's iteration of Obito also puts Yagura, the 4th Mizukage, under Genjutsu so complete that he's able to trump up his bloodlust for decades. A Genjutsu so powerful that it's actively compared to Kodo Matsukame. And it has to be compared to Kodo Matsukame because Obito is able to place a perfect Jinchuriki under Genjutsu, something that's supposed to be impossible. And he did it for a decade plus. Not to mention his infinite access to a wall of Sharingan at this moment in time that would allow for him to use Izanagi like Danzo on a bridge. And yeah, even though this is the weakest version of Obito we ever see, it's the strongest member of the Akatsuki we ever see. Unless you consider Madara a member of the Akatsuki. But if Obito's at number 4, who's stronger than him? Well, apparently, it's Itachi. Because at number 3 on this list is Itachi. Above Obito. Let's all ask ourselves the question. If Itachi, who was a spy in the Akatsuki, was stronger than Obito, why didn't he kill him? If Itachi, who 100% knew that Obito was the person responsible for the attack of Kurama on Naruto's birthday, and therefore the pseudo-leader of the Akatsuki, and Itachi was trying to make sure that Konoha remained untouched by the Akatsuki, if he was stronger than Obito, why didn't he kill Obito? The answer is simply because he couldn't. Is Itachi insanely powerful? Yeah, 100%. And do I actually have him at number 3 in my Akatsuki power rankings? Yes, 100%, even under the rules that comicbook.com has set up. See, be it pre-war or post-war, Itachi will always exist at number 3 amongst the Akatsuki. See, because while he did get stronger in the 4th Great Shinobi World War, so did the 2 people above him on this list, Nagato and Obito. And therefore, while Itachi's peak power is during the 4th Great Shinobi World War, so are Nagato and Obito's, both of which are higher than Itachi's. And like, yeah, Itachi's power is obviously undeniable. He has the undoubtedly greatest spirit weapons we've ever seen on a Susanoo, between his Sword of Totsuka and his Yata Mirror, that have the ability to reflect away all Genjutsu, Ninjutsu, and Taijutsu and seal away people in one slash. But he also has access to some of the better Sharingan abilities we've ever seen in Tsukiyomi and Amaterasu. A perfect balance of Ninjutsu and Genjutsu. Tie that into his top 5 in the universe intellect, his ridiculous Shuriken Jutsu, his crazy speed, his incredible Taijutsu, and his Ninjutsu output, and the only thing that holds him back is obviously his chakra pool and his chakra sickness. However, there is nothing, and I mean nothing, Itachi could do in combat against any iteration of Obito. Objectively, Obito is either a better Genjutsu user or equal to the level of Genjutsu user of Itachi. I know what some of you are thinking right now, oh, but Nick, didn't Itachi place a perfect Jinchuriki under Genjutsu as well? Naruto wasn't a perfect Jinchuriki when Itachi placed him under Genjutsu. Kurama had no reason to break Naruto out of Genjutsu in that moment. Yagura absolutely was a perfect Jinchuriki when he was placed under Genjutsu by Obito. And therefore in a battle of Genjutsu, they'd either draw or Obito would win. Ties into the fact that Obito is half white Zetsu and therefore has Hashirama's cells, aka a regeneration factor and a crazy chakra pool. And in a battle of stamina and durability, Obito wins. Oh, but Nick, what about the Sword of Totsuka? Itachi could seal away Obito in a second. Yeah, if you could hit him. And while yes, there is a possible arguing point here that the Sword of Totsuka targets your soul and not your body, and Obito maybe doesn't teleport away his soul, there is no way to confirm or deny that theory. But listen, I'm also willing to admit that Toby doesn't have a whole lot of things that could kill Itachi either. A battle between the two of them probably wouldn't end in either of them dying. However, if it did have to end in one of them dying, the person that would die would be Itachi, because he would run out of chakra. And therefore, while I agree that he should be number 3 on this list, him being above Obito should be considered a cardinal sin. But if that's a cardinal sin, well then I guess this next upcoming entry is one of the deadly 7 ones, because apparently our number 2 entry on this list is Kisame. Yes, the guy who admits that Itachi is stronger than him multiple times is apparently stronger than Itachi. But listen, to fly in the face of this actual lore, this article must have a fair amount of evidence to back up this claim, so let's see what they say. Nonetheless, in terms of raw power, Itachi is outshined by his devoted partner Kisame. And I mean, like, obviously, yeah, every single member of the Akatsuki is outshone in terms of raw power by Kisame. If we did an Akatsuki arm wrestling contest, Kisame would win. Doesn't mean he would win in a death battle or that he would be able to dodge Tsukiyomi, but sure, yeah, he's strong. The article continues on by saying, everybody says this, but it bears repeating. He's called the tailless tailed beast for a reason. His chakra pool is patently bonkers. It's only bolstered by his chakra absorbing Samehada. And once again, that's a point that I absolutely concede. Kisame 100% has more chakra than Itachi, and he has potentially access to limitless chakra through the absorption technique of Samehada and the fact that Samehada absorbs chakra and feeds it back into him. But once again, chakra pool only matters if the battle goes on for too long, which in a battle against Itachi, it wouldn't. The article continues on by saying, because he absorbs chakra, only extremely adept taijutsu users like Might Guy and possibly genjutsu users, depending on whether or not he can absorb something like Itachi's Tsukiyomi, stand a chance. So right there, what we did was identify the fact that Kisame's biggest weakness isn't actually taijutsu, it's genjutsu. Taijutsu isn't a good idea against Kisame. Yes, he can absorb ninjutsu, and therefore launching fireballs at him isn't a good idea because Samehada will just absorb the chakra. But taijutsu is also not a good idea against Kisame because if you get cut at all, Samehada will continually feed off your chakra. Any and all wounds inflicted during your combat with Kisame will continually leak chakra that will flow directly into Samehada's mouth. And therefore the idea of squabbling with a man shark holding a saw blade for a weapon isn't what I would identify as a good idea. And therefore the best idea for combat against Kisame is to place him under genjutsu. Yes, his chakra pool is insane, but it's never stated that his chakra control is anything all that impressive. But there's still some writing on this article, so let's see if it saves itself here. The article continues on by saying, it's worth mentioning that during their confrontation with Team Guy in the Kazekage rescue mission arc, Kisame still pushed Guy to open up to the 6 gates, despite his and Itachi's shadow clones only possessing 30% of their chakra. Kisame is a big, beefy master of water release jutsu, can summon an ocean at will and absorb enemy attacks. In the end, the only one who could take him down was himself, committing suicide to prevent Konoha from gathering intelligence on the Akatsuki. And there's a couple of problems with this paragraph. One, so often people talk about this battle between Might Guy and Kisame and Itachi and Naruto as they battled against their clones that only had 30% of their chakra. And thus a lot of people conflate this sequence with the idea that Might Guy and Naruto were only battling against a 30% powered Itachi and Kisame. But that's not the situation. See, the shadow clones created using 30% of Kisame and Itachi's chakra were 100% as powerful as Itachi or Kisame. However, their chakra pool was only 30% the size of Kisame or Itachi's chakra pool. And therefore we were seeing the full power of both Itachi and Kisame in combat. However, the fuse on how long they were able to burn was simply just shorter. Now, mind you, in the case of Kisame, whose chakra pool is apparently so large it's referred to as that of a tailless tailed beast, 30% is still a ton of chakra, more chakra than most people probably have. And as we've never seen Kisame run out of chakra, there's really no reason for us to believe that Might Guy wasn't fighting against what is basically a full-powered version of Kisame in that battle, which is why he had to open to the 6th gate. So saying, oh, 1/3 of Kisame equals 6th gate Guy in terms of strength doesn't make any sense. And also, while Kisame obviously was responsible for his own death, it's not like Might Guy hadn't defeated him and was dragging him to jail. Like, Might Guy could have killed Kisame, he just didn't. But anyways, if Kisame is the second strongest member of the Akatsuki, who's the one who stands above him? Well, apparently, according to this article, It's Nagato. And listen, this isn't an insane take. Like I said earlier, I could make arguments that Nagato could defeat Obito in a fight, but a lot of those arguments would be objectively false. Yes, Nagato was able to level the entirety of Konoha with an almighty push. Yes, he was able to defeat a Sage Mode Jiraiya with Ma and Pa fused to his shoulders. Yes, he was able to defeat Kakashi and Tsunade, and was able to push Naruto to his literal breaking point so bad that Kushina had to respawn inside of him to put him back together. He was able to control the Geto statue, kill Hanzo the Salamander, and he was brought back in the 4th Great Shinobi World War. He fought against Killer Bee, KCM1 Naruto, and reincarnated Itachi simultaneously. However, there's a reason he was the figurehead of the Akatsuki and not the actual leader, and that's because Obito was stronger than him. Yes, does Nagato have the more impressive dojutsu? 100%. But when it comes down to it, Obito just has the more impressive arsenal of skills. And thus, while Nagato being at number 1 on this list is not its most egregious sin, this article believing that there is 3 spots between Nagato and Obito, well, is. But I know some of you are itching to hear what my official list is, and thus let's get into it. In last place, we have Zetsu. At 10, we have Hidan. 9, we have Konan. 8, we have Sasori. 7, we have Deidara. 6, we have Kakuzu. 5, we have Orochimaru. 4, we have Kisame. 3, we have Itachi. 2, we have Nagato. And 1, we have Obito. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. If you had to rank the Akatsuki, how would you place them? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you want to consider all of their peak powers, Orochimaru might be 2.